Have you ever just stopped in the middle of a crowded room, completely surrounded by noise, and felt this overwhelming, entirely suffocating exhaustion? I'm not talking about needing a nap. I mean a deep, bone-weary soul exhaustion. We spend our lives constantly swiping, endlessly consuming, agonizing over every little failure. We stare into these glowing black mirrors in the palms of our hands, and we walk away feeling like we're always falling short of some impossible ideal. Well, in this explainer, we're going to completely shatter that illusion. Seriously, why do we do this? Why do we paralyze ourselves waiting for a savior or a flawless leader or even just waiting for a flawless version of ourselves before we actually start living? We sit in the dark, waiting for the storm to magically pass, telling ourselves, once everything is perfectly aligned, then I'll begin. Once I have the exact right title, then I'll step up. Yet, something inside still feels entirely empty, because your soul was never actually designed for this waiting game. There's this fascinating connection in Arabic. The word for reality is haq, or hakika. But here is the profound twist. Those exact same words also mean purpose. They're literally intertwined. If you run away from the messy, unfiltered, chaotic reality of your life, you are running away from your purpose. It's like setting up a target in pitch-black darkness and just firing arrows into the void. You are never going to find your purpose in a fantasy. You have to face the dark. Okay, imagine this for a second. You wake up and you're utterly lost in a dark, terrifying forest. No phone, no food, no help coming. Visceral panic sets in, right? So you sit down at the base of a tree and you just sob. You cry for 6 hours straight, screaming, "Why me? Who is going to save me?" But eventually, the tears dry up. And then a completely terrifying realization hits you. Nothing changed. You are still sitting in the exact same spot, in the exact same dark woods. Look, there is a massive, unforgiving gap between our emotional reaction to things and our unaltered reality. Your tears, your anger, your crushing anxiety, they are completely valid. But while they might drain your body of fluids and exhaust your mind, the forest around you remains exactly the same. Your feelings do not magically change your coordinates. You still have to get up, you still have to walk. But this illusion doesn't just poison us individually. It completely infects our collective psyche. We constantly look back, right? We wait for some golden age to magically return, asking, where is the next Saladin? Where is the next Umar? We convince ourselves that if we just had the perfect leadership, all of this internal emptiness, all of our societal chaos would just vanish overnight. But honestly, would it? Let's go back to the absolute peak of Islamic history for a moment. Surah At-Tawbah. Mecca has been conquered. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the absolute greatest leader in human history, is at the helm. You would think this is it, right? The ultimate moment of absolute perfection, the golden age to end all golden ages. But the revelation that comes down at this very stage completely shatters our modern delusions. Because the reality of Medina tears down this myth of a shiny utopian society. Even under a literal perfect leader who was receiving direct divine revelation, the community was incredibly complex. It was fractured. Yes, you had the elite believers, the Muhajirun and Ansar, but right next to them, you had hypocrites among the Bedouins. You had hypocrites hiding in plain sight right there in Medina. And you had ordinary, struggling Muslims who openly admitted their sins. This was the raw, unfiltered reality. So, if perfection literally did not exist back then, why on earth are we agonizing over it now? If the greatest generation in human history wasn't entirely flawless, why are you burning yourself out trying to be? I really want you to feel the massive wave of relief in that. Perfection was never meant for this world. Chasing it is just a guaranteed recipe for spiritual collapse. That is exactly where the illusion begins. See, philosophical idealism is basically a paralyzing daydream. It's staring up at some flawless, imaginary castle in the sky and demanding a perfect world before you take a single step forward. But practical idealism, real faith, that is grounded. It is gritty. It's about getting your hands dirty with the mud and the broken bricks that are sitting right in front of you. You aren't being asked to build a utopia. You're just asked to do your absolute best with the broken pieces you've actually been given. We live in a world that is so addicted to validation. We are absolutely obsessed with the aesthetics of leadership. We all want the title, don't we? We collect certificates, we enroll in leadership boot camps, we declare ourselves the leaders of tomorrow just to feed our own egos. But think about it. Where are the Quranic programs on how to be a leader? They don't exist. The Quran doesn't obsess over titles. This whole ego-driven desire to be the main character of the story, it completely misses the point. We were never meant to be a room full of disconnected egos fighting over a microphone, clawing at each other for a shiny title. The actual concept of community is entirely different. Take the word ummah. It comes from a root that literally means to head towards destination. It's not a static group of individuals. It implies a collective tide, a massive wave of people moving forward together, shoulder to shoulder, toward a single unified purpose. And within that tide, true leadership is never a title you just demand. It is simply a byproduct of relentless service. Think about the best cardiologist in the world, or the fiercest defense attorney. Do they walk into a room demanding you call them a leader? No way. They just put their heads down and they do the work. They solve actual problems. Leadership is just what people call you after your relentless service has brought them value. And even if you do manage to build some flawless, incredible legacy, think of the legendary, perfectly engineered iron wall of Dhul-Qarnayn mentioned in the Quran, even that is destined to crumble. The verse literally says, "When the promise of my Lord comes, he will level it to dust." That is where the illusion of permanence ends. We have to let go of our ego's desperate, exhausting need to leave an immortal legacy. Every single worldly thing fades. But because we forget this, we wake up and we drink a daily poison, the poison of comparison. We stare into our screens, comparing our incredibly painful, messy, behind-the-scenes reality to everyone else's perfectly curated highlight reels. We feel this crushing anxiety because someone else built a company faster, or memorized a book faster, or just appears to be so much more spiritually elevated. We are literally drowning in the noise of other people's filtered lives. But you have to remember that digital mirror is a complete liar. When you compare yourself to someone else, you are entirely ignoring the unique spiritual tools God carved specifically for them. You're ignoring the unseen, agonizing emotional struggles they deal with behind closed doors. And you completely overlook the very specific, divinely assigned trials that were meant only for you. Comparison doesn't just steal your joy, it literally suffocates your destiny. So how do we strip away all of this noise? The ultimate spiritual resolution is shockingly simple. Say, act, work, and Allah will see your work. That's it. The divine decree doesn't demand that you become some world-renowned thought leader. It doesn't demand flawless perfection or an entirely spotless record. It simply demands that you act, that you put your head down and do the gritty work right in front of you. Think about a little kid breaking down and crying over a terribly difficult math test. As a teacher, what do? You hand them a tissue, you let them cry it out, but when the tears are gone, that test is still sitting on the desk. You are allowed to stumble. You are absolutely allowed to cry under the crushing weight of modern life. But true peace, salvation, it only comes from wiping your face, picking that pencil back up, and finishing the messy work. And the most profound beauty of this faith is that mercy is literally hardwired directly into its architecture. If you can't stand up, you pray sitting down. No water, you are told to literally use the dust of the earth. If you're traveling, you shorten the prayer. If you're sick, you fast later. Do you see? The entire system was meticulously designed for exhausted, fragile, flawed human beings. It was never designed for flawless angels. So please, just stop punishing yourself for not being an angel. Look honestly at the raw reality of your life. It is entirely okay to admit your failures. It's okay to admit you were just so tired. Your humanity is not a mistake. In fact, your brokenness is the exact canvas on which your spiritual growth is supposed to be painted. Take a deep breath. Now ask yourself, what happens when we finally surrender this ridiculous illusion of control? Imagine the sheer, overwhelming relief of just dropping that heavy armor, the suffocating armor of needing to be perfect, the armor of endlessly chasing validation, the armor of comparing your real life to digital illusions. Just let it fall. Because here is the profound, beautiful truth. You are not the savior of the world. And honestly, that is perfect. Letting go of this massive, ego-driven need to save everything is the exact moment you actually become incredibly useful to the world. When you finally stop trying to be the mythical hero of the story, you can actually become a true servant. And that leaves us right here, in the quiet, deeply peaceful surrender of reality. You do not need a golden age. You do not need a flawless track record. You just need to look at the broken pieces of the world sitting right in front of you, pick up your entirely imperfect tools, and begin. The illusion is over. The work is waiting. Will you pick up the pencil?
Why do we feel so paralyzed when we're supposedly finally building our lives? Like, what if the modern obsession with, being a leader or curating this perfect highlight reel and achieving this pristine level of spiritual or professional perfection is actually the exact psychological trap that is destroying our peace?
That's a really heavy question.
Right. But you look around today, and there is just this heavy, almost suffocating feeling of spiritual exhaustion in the air.
Absolutely. It's palpable.
We're told we can be anything, achieve anything, optimize literally everything. I mean, we have more access to knowledge, more productivity hacks, more leadership seminars than any generation in human history.
Yeah, the resources are endless.
And yet, the more we chase that pristine, optimized image of a life, the more numb and utterly empty we seem to feel inside. It's like we're doing all the right things, but the soul is just quietly bleeding out.
It is a profound existential contradiction, really, and it's one that sits squarely at the intersection of our modern, hyper-connected anxieties and ancient spiritual wisdom.
Which is exactly what we're going into today. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we're going to unpack this using some incredible source material, specifically a profound lecture by Nouman Ali Khan.
Right, and it's a fascinating perspective. We are essentially experiencing a crisis of reality.
A crisis of reality. What do you mean by that?
Well, we've built a culture that worships the ideal and actively despises the mundane. I mean, when you are constantly bombarded by the curated peaks of human existence.
Like the billionaire under 30.
Exactly, the billionaire under 30, or the spiritual guru who seemingly never experiences a moment of doubt, the perfectly aesthetic family. When you see that all day, your own gritty, flawed, friction-filled reality begins to feel not just inadequate, but like a fundamental failure of your existence.
Man, that is so true. It feels like you're just inherently broken.
Right. But what we're exploring today is not a guilt trip.
Yeah, we're not here to preach.
No, not at all. It's an intelligent, compassionate, and fiercely realistic deconstruction of why human beings constantly wait to be saved by ideal circumstances, instead of just stepping into the heavy, unglamorous reality of their own lives.
So I want to start by looking at where this desire for the perfect circumstance actually originates, because it feels like we project this not just onto our futures, but onto our pasts as well.
We absolutely do. Nostalgia is a powerful thing.
Right. When you look at the crisis of the modern world, the political instability, the social fragmentation, the sheer loneliness of the modern era, people invariably look backward.
Always.
You hear it constantly in historical or religious discourse. People say, if only we had a new Salahuddin, if only we had a leader with the absolute uncompromising justice of Umar.
Right, the golden age fallacy.
Yeah, and for those listening who might not be steeped in that specific history, Salahuddin is this iconic 12th century leader who united fragmented lands, reclaimed Jerusalem, and is universally remembered as like the pinnacle of chivalry and success.
Legendary figure.
And Umar was the second caliph of Islam, whose era is remembered as the gold standard of societal justice. People invoke these names as if to say, success, peace, and progress can only happen if we have pristine, superhuman leadership and a society that perfectly aligns with divine will.
Well, the psychological mechanism at play there is nostalgia being weaponized against the present.
Weaponized. That's a strong word.
But it's true. When we invoke figures like Salahuddin or Umar, we aren't actually looking at history anymore. We are looking at mythology.
Ah, I see. We filter out the bad parts.
Exactly. We smooth out all the rough edges, the grueling betrayals, the sleepless nights, the profound societal frictions those leaders had to navigate. We just ignore all of that.
Right.
And the underlying assumption we're making is incredibly dangerous. We assume that a golden age means an era completely devoid of human messiness.
We convince ourselves that one day the perfect conditions will align, the ultimate leader will arrive, the societal puzzle pieces will click into place, and only then can we finally do our meaningful work.
Precisely. We put our lives on hold for a fantasy.
But the research I was reviewing for our conversation today, it completely shatters that assumption. It takes this demand for a pristine golden age and holds it up to the harsh light of actual divine text.
And the contrast is shocking.
It really is. Because if we are going to look for a utopian society, logically, the mind goes straight to the era of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, specifically the very end of his life.
Right, because in the historical imagination, that is the moment the credits should roll. It is the cinematic triumph.
Exactly. The physical battles are largely over. Mecca has been conquered. You have massive numbers of people from all across the Arabian Peninsula pouring into Medina to convert to Islam.
The peak of the mountain.
Yeah, if you're looking at a historical spreadsheet, this is the absolute peak. It sounds like the ultimate happily ever after. But here's where it gets really interesting. When we look at two specific long chapters of the Quran revealed right at this tail end of the Prophet's mission, Surah at Tawbah and Surah Al-Ma'idah, the text doesn't describe a utopia at all.
Not even close.
It describes a society that is breathtakingly complex, deeply flawed, and painfully human.
The divine text completely strips away the romanticism. It categorizes the society of Medina into three distinct groups. And understanding these groups is really the key to dismantling our modern paralysis.
Okay, let's break them down.
So the first group is the one we project onto the entire era. The elite believers, the Muhajirun and the Ansar.
Let's contextualize them for a second, because the word elite today usually means wealth or status, right? Like tech billionaires or celebrities.
Right, but their currency was pure sacrifice.
Exactly. The Muhajirun were the ones who abandoned their homes, their wealth, and their safety in Mecca to face starvation and exile for their beliefs.
Unimaginable hardship.
And the Ansar were the residents of Medina who took these refugees in, literally splitting their property and wealth down the middle to accommodate them. Like, here's half my house, here's half my money. They are the benchmark of human spiritual achievement.
They are the absolute best of the best. The Quran explicitly states that Allah is pleased with them, and they are pleased with Him.
So if the text stopped there, our assumption of a pristine golden age would be totally validated.
Right. If it was just them, it would be a utopia. But it is the second group that introduces a profound, almost terrifying psychological reality.
This is the part that genuinely gave me pause when I was reading through the sources. The text reveals that right there, living among the Prophet, walking the exact same streets as the Muhajirun, praying in the same ranks, are hypocrites.
Yes.
And it uses a specific Arabic word, maradu. Can you unpack the weight of that word? Because my understanding is that this isn't just someone who occasionally skips a prayer or makes a mistake.
No, not at all. Maradu implies a mastery. It's a deeply ingrained, almost pathological skill in deception.
Wow. Mastery of hypocrisy.
Yes. It means they've become smooth, polished in their hypocrisy. They say the right things. They appear devout. They participate in all the societal rituals. But internally, they are entirely disconnected, self-serving, and toxic.
That is chilling.
And what makes this so staggering is that Allah tells the Prophet himself regarding this group, you do not know them, we know them.
I am stuck on the implications of that. Like, really think about that. You have the greatest leader in human history, a man receiving direct divine revelation.
The ultimate leader.
Right. And yet, the divine architecture of that reality allowed for toxic, hidden elements to exist right next to him, without him being given an itemized list of who they all were.
He had to navigate the uncertainty.
But why? If God is communicating with him, why not just point them out and purge the society so it actually is perfect? It seems like it would save so much trouble.
Because if the divine hand constantly intervened to remove every flawed, toxic, or hypocritical element from society, it would cease to be a human society.
It would just be angels.
Exactly. It would be a society of angels. The profound wisdom here is that Allah was demonstrating to all future generations that even the greatest, most spiritually elevated community in the history of mankind had to navigate the friction of hidden betrayal, political maneuvering, and toxic personalities. The perfect leader did not get a perfect society. He got a real one.
So if the Prophet himself, at the absolute zenith of his success, presided over a community that was an intricate web of pure believers and masterful hypocrites, what does that say about the third group? Because there is another demographic mention that I think speaks most directly to who we are today.
The third group is really the anchor for the rest of human history. The text describes ordinary people who mix good deeds with bad deeds.
The messy middle.
Yes, they are not the elite Muhajirun who sacrificed everything, nor are they the deceptive hypocrites. They are simply flawed human beings.
Just normal people.
They try to do the right thing, they stumble, they give in to their desires, they recognize their mistakes, they feel the crushing weight of their guilt, and they hope for repentance.
They are the people fighting the daily, unglamorous battle of their own nature.
Precisely. Now, let's bring this back to the listener right now. If we establish that the pinnacle of human history, the era we romanticize as the ultimate golden age, was populated by a minority of elites, a dangerous undercurrent of polished hypocrites, and a vast majority of ordinary, struggling people trying to navigate their flaws.
Yeah.
Why on earth do we demand pristine circumstances in our own lives before we take action?
We hold ourselves hostage to a standard that literally never existed.
Never.
We say, I'll start studying my faith deeply when my schedule clears up.
Yeah.
Or I'll volunteer in my community when the local leadership stops being so political and flawed.
Right, the excuses are endless.
I'll fix my relationship with my family when everyone else apologizes and acts rationally. We are waiting for a fictionalized version of Medina, completely ignoring the fact that the actual Medina required navigating massive human imperfection.
There is a beautiful linguistic connection in Arabic that perfectly illustrates this reality. The word for reality is haq, or hakika.
Okay.
That exact same root word is heavily intertwined with the concept of purpose or truth.
Interesting.
It means you cannot access your purpose if you refuse to inhabit your reality. The psychological metaphor we can use here is a rock and the ocean.
I like metaphors. Walk me through this one.
So reality, the messy, flawed, difficult circumstances of your actual life, is a massive, immovable rock. Human idealism, our desperate wishes for things to be easier, fairer, or more perfect, those are the waves.
Okay, the waves crash against the rock.
Right. The waves crash against the rock. They make a tremendous amount of noise. They throw up a lot of spray, and they look incredibly dramatic. But eventually, the wave recedes, and the rock of reality is sitting in the exact same place, entirely unchanged by the emotional performance of the water.
Man, so if my idealism, my anger at how broken the world is, or my desire for perfect conditions is just water crashing against a rock, what happens when I finally exhaust myself?
That's the critical moment.
What happens when you, the listener, realize that no perfect leader is coming? The circumstances are never going to be pristine, and you are standing in a reality that feels completely overwhelming. Because knowing the world is flawed doesn't make it any less terrifying to navigate.
Not at all. Which brings us to the paralyzing nature of human emotion in the face of raw reality. To understand how we navigate this, we have to look at how we respond to sudden isolation and trauma.
Let's use the mental exercise I found in the research because it paints this picture so vividly. I want you, listening to this right now, to imagine this scenario.
It's a powerful visualization.
You wake up and you are entirely lost in a dark, silent, massive forest.
Okay.
You have no memory of how you got there. You pat your pockets, no phone, no map, no compass. You have no food.
Complete isolation.
The sun is starting to set, the shadows are getting longer, the temperature's dropping, and there's absolutely no one around to help you.
The immediate psychological and neurobiological response to that scenario is a massive spike in cortisol and adrenaline. The amygdala, the fear center of the brain, completely hijacks your cognitive processes.
And in that hijacked state, you have choices. Option one, which is honestly the most common human reflex, is that you sit down on the damp earth, pull your knees to your chest, and you cry.
A very natural response.
You can weep for 6 hours straight. You can yell at the sky. You can ask all the heavy, unanswerable existential questions like, why me? What did I do to deserve this? This isn't fair. Who is going to come and save me? You can let a profound, burning anger wash over you.
And we must be incredibly precise here. Every single one of those emotions is entirely valid. The fear is real. The anger at the injustice of the situation is real. The sorrow is a natural physiological response to trauma.
Yeah.
But here's the sharp, unforgiving edge of the truth. Emotions, no matter how intense, do not alter physical reality.
I want to push back on that slightly, because in modern therapy and self-care culture, we are constantly told that feeling our feelings is the work. We're told that crying is therapeutic, that processing the anger is how we heal. Are you saying that emotional processing is useless?
Not useless, but insufficient.
Insufficient.
Yes. Crying releases oxytocin and endogenous opioids. It physically self-soothes the body. It lowers the immediate stress response. That is a biological necessity.
Right, you need to regulate.
But we mistake the soothing of the nervous system for the altering of our environment. After you sit in that forest and weep for 6 hours, after you have exhausted every tear duct and processed every ounce of your anger, you open your eyes and the trees have not moved. The path has not magically appeared. The temperature has still dropped. The only tangible physical difference in your reality is that you are now 6 hours closer to darkness and significantly more dehydrated.
Wow. The forest doesn't care about your tears.
Reality is deeply apathetic to our emotional protests. There is a lighter analogy that demonstrates how early this conditioning starts. Think about a third-grade classroom.
Oh, the math test analogy.
Ah,
I love this because it scales down the existential dread into something we've all witnessed or experienced.
exactly.
So the teacher hands out a difficult multi-page math assignment. A third grader looks at the fractions, feels a wave of overwhelm, puts their head on the desk, and begins to sob loudly.
It's too hard. I can't do it.
Now, why does the child do that?
To get out of it.
Right. Because in the developmental psychology of a child, tears are a transaction. They're a currency. A child learns very early on that if they broadcast their distress loudly enough, an adult will usually swoop in, take the painful stimulus away, and absolve them of the responsibility.
They cry to buy a rescue.
Exactly.
But a wise teacher doesn't take the paper away. The teacher doesn't invalidate the child by screaming at them to stop crying either.
No, that would be cruel.
Teacher walks over, places a box of tissues on the desk, and softly says, "Here, cry as much as you need to. It is okay to be frustrated, but when you are done crying, when all the tissues are gone, this pencil and this math assignment are still going to be sitting right here." That is the transition from childhood to psychological maturity. But the tragedy of our modern era is that we have built an entire society, specifically a digital ecosystem, that encourages us to remain third graders forever.
How so? Walk me through the mechanics of that, because on the surface, it feels like we are more emotionally aware than ever before. We talk about our feelings constantly online.
We are emotionally aware, but we are actionably paralyzed. Look at the attention economy. Social media algorithms are specifically designed to prioritize and monetize outrage, distress, and victimhood.
Sadness goes viral.
It does. If you post about a quiet, steady accomplishment, it gets minimal traction. But if you post a highly emotional, reactive broadcast of your pain, your existential dread, or your anger at the system the algorithm rewards you, you get a massive dopamine hit of sympathy, likes, and validating comments.
So we basically replaced the adult swooping in to take the math test away with 1,000 strangers validating our tears in the comments section.
Exactly. We yell into the digital void, hoping the universe will act like an overindulgent parent. We get the dopamine hit of feeling seen and supported, which tricks the brain into thinking a problem has actually been solved.
But nothing changed.
Right. The neurochemistry of sympathy is a mirage. When you log off, the difficult assignment of your actual life, the failing marriage, the stagnant career, the spiritual emptiness, it is still sitting right there on the desk.
So what is the alternative in the context of the forest or the math test? What does the actual transition into mature action look like, especially from a spiritual perspective? Because we can't just sit and stare at the test.
In Islamic theology, there is a concept called tawakkul.
Tawakkul.
Yes. It is often loosely translated as trust in God, but that translation is, frankly, far too passive. True tawakkul is active reliance.
Active reliance. What does that look like in the forest?
It means you acknowledge the terror of the forest. You allow yourself to cry and lower your cortisol. But then you wipe your face, you stand up, you find the tallest tree, you physically exert the energy to climb it. You look for a vantage point to find a river or a road, and you start walking.
You do the work.
You do everything within your physical and mental power to survive, and then you trust that God will put blessing in your footsteps.
You don't pray for the forest to disappear.
Yeah.
You pray for the strength to walk through it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But here is where the human ego lays its next trap.
There's always a trap.
Always. Let's say you finally accept reality. You wipe your tears, you look at the broken state of the world or your community or your own life, and you decide it is time to take action.
Oh, wait, good step.
The immediate reflex in our modern, hyper-capitalist, ego-driven society is to say, I am going to become a leader.
Oh, this is the paradox that I found so incredibly sharp in the research. We live in an era that is absolutely obsessed with the aesthetics of leadership. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. You have corporate retreats, master classes, weekend seminars, 2-year certification programs. Literally everyone's LinkedIn bio says thought leader or visionary.
We have created a culture where the title is the bearded nation.
Right. And the profound irony highlighted in the notes is that you have people who spend thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours taking intense leadership certifications. And at the end of it, they're leading absolutely nothing except the printed piece of paper in their hands.
It's performative.
They decide they want to help their community, so they start studying Arabic or join a local board. But the hidden motivation isn't the passion for the language or the community. It is the desire to acquire the social capital and the title of leader.
They want the crown before they have plowed the field. Now, contrast this modern session with how the Quran approaches the concept of leadership.
This is fascinating.
If you ask the average person what the divine texts say about leadership, they assume there must be an exhaustive, step-by-step manual. They assume the Quran acts like a 7th century version of the 7 habits of highly effective people.
But it doesn't. The research points out that the Quran basically ignores the modern, ego-driven concept of leadership entirely. It is a staggering absence. How do we make sense of a divine text that is meant to guide humanity completely sidestepping the one thing modern society tells us we absolutely need to be successful?
To understand the absence, we have to look at the linguistics of the words the Quran actually does use. The source material dives into the Arabic word ummah.
Ummah. We usually translate that as nation or community, right? Like the global Muslim ummah.
We universally translate it that way, yes. But Arabic is a root-based language, and the roots reveal the underlying psychology of the word. Ummah comes from the roots amma and tayama.
And what do those mean?
These words do not describe a static group of people sharing a demographic identity. They mean to purposefully move in a specific direction.
So an ummah is inherently active. It is a collective on a journey, not just a demographic sitting in a room.
Exactly. And from that exact same directional root, we get the word imam.
Wait, really?
Yes. Today, we use imam as a heavy formal title of religious leadership or authority. But linguistically, an imam is simply the one who is standing imama in front.
Just structurally in front.
Right. Their purpose is not to sit on a throne. Their purpose is to stand in front of the moving collective to ensure everyone is facing the right direction.
That distinction changes everything. It means leadership in this framework is directional, not positional. It is functional, not hierarchical. The person in front is only there to facilitate the movement of the group, not to absorb the adoration of the group.
It strips the ego out of the equation completely. And because the system is entirely functional, the Quran doesn't waste time giving a masterclass on how to acquire a title. Instead, the ultimate divine command regarding our interaction with the world is staggeringly, beautifully simple. The command is imala.
Just work, act, do the deed.
That is it. The text says, work, and Allah will see your work, and his messenger and the believers. Look at what is profoundly absent from that verse.
No mention of titles.
Exactly. It does not say work so that you may be elevated over others. It does not say work so that you can become a leader. It places the ultimate value on the intrinsic integrity of the labor itself. And it establishes that the primary audience for your effort is divine, not social.
I am trying to square that with how the real world operates, though, because that sounds beautiful in a spiritual context. But let's be honest about the corporate world, or even the structure of modern community organization.
You're cutthroat.
Yeah. If you just put your head down and do the work, without networking, without claiming a title, without playing the political game, you get stepped on. People take credit for your labor. Isn't telling people to abandon the pursuit of leadership titles a recipe for being marginalized?
That is the fear, yes. But we are confusing worldly management structures with true enduring influence. The argument here is not to avoid taking responsibility or leading a team if the work requires it.
Okay, so it's not about hiding.
No, it's about the order of operations. The modern world says, demand the title and then figure out the work. The spiritual paradigm says, master the work and the title becomes irrelevant or it will be forced upon you by necessity.
The research brings up this concept of the universal leader myth to illustrate this, and I think it is brilliant.
It perfectly diagnoses the problem.
We have this romanticized, almost childish idea in many communities that we need one single perfect visionary who is an expert in theology, economics, politics, and psychology all at once. We assume the person with the most religious knowledge, the one who leads the prayers, should naturally be the CEO of every community initiative.
It is a massive intellectual failure on our part to burden one human being with that expectation. The analogy used in the source material grounds this immediately. If your father suddenly collapses and needs a quadruple bypass surgery, you do not run to the local religious leader and ask him to scrub into the operating room.
Right. You don't say, well, his recitation of the Quran is flawless, so his scalpel work must be excellent. You would be out of your mind.
You go to the absolute best, most obsessively dedicated cardiologist you can find.
Obviously.
Why? Because that cardiologist spent 20 years staring at the intricacies of the human heart. They did the relentless, grueling work. And because of that work in that specific operating room, that surgeon is the undisputed leader.
Yeah, nobody is arguing with the surgeon.
Exactly. If you are facing a terrifying legal crisis that threatens your family's safety, you do not just ask any mom for a prayer and sit on your couch. The Prophet famously instructed a man to tie your camel and trust in Allah.
Trust, but take action.
The trust is the spiritual anchor, but tying the camel is the physical work. So you pray, but then you go out and hire the sharpest, most relentless lawyer you can afford.
Because in the courtroom, the lawyer is the leader.
The paradigm shift we need to absorb is this. Titles do not forge a leader. A perfectly formatted certificate does not make you a leader. Your work makes you a leader.
That is a tough pill to swallow for the ego.
It is. But if you dedicate yourself to a specific craft, whether you are a trauma surgeon, a civil rights attorney, a plumber who never cuts corners, or a mother raising emotionally resilient children, and you do that work with such profound integrity that it becomes undeniably valuable, people will organically turn to you.
The friction of reality will force people to seek you out. They will say, the pipes are bursting, go to him. The community is fracturing, go to her. She knows how to mediate. Society will essentially draft you into leadership because your competence is undeniable.
And here is the beautiful irony. When society finally calls you a leader, it won't matter to you because that was never your goal. Your ego isn't wrapped up in the title. Your only goal was to perform the labor to a standard worthy of being presented to the divine.
Okay, so if the formula is that simple, just do the work with integrity, why is it incredibly hard?
Because we get in our own way.
Big time. Because if I look at my own life, and I know everyone listening to this can relate, the procrastination is so real. The paralysis is real. We buy the domain name for the business, we write the first page of the book, we sign up for the language class, and 2 weeks later, the domain is expired, the document is closed, and we've quit.
Every time.
If we know the work is the only way out of the forest, why does the human brain actively self-sabotage and fight against doing it?
This brings us to the psychological bedrock of our paralysis. It is our deeply toxic, utterly dysfunctional relationship with perfectionism.
The poison of the ideal.
Yes. The source material drops a philosophical insight here that we really need to chew on. When you create a culture that loves perfection, you are mandating the love of something that will literally never exist.
It is a recipe for perpetual, unavoidable misery.
Because perfection does not exist in the temporal physical world. It defies the laws of entropy. It defies the parameters of human biology. When you fall in love with the fantasy of a flawless startup, a flawless physique, a flawless marriage, or a flawless spiritual routine, you are chasing a ghost.
But the ego uses that ghost as a shield, doesn't it? The research notes that the psychological damage of this chase results in a state of constant defeat. Walk me through the mechanics of how perfectionism actually protects the ego while destroying our progress.
It is a brilliant, albeit destructive, defense mechanism. If your standard is absolute, unyielding perfection, then the moment you try to speak that new language and sound like a fool, or rate that first draft and realize it is garbage, or have the hard conversation with your spouse and it turns into a messy argument.
Reality hits.
Exactly. You instantly realize the reality is not going to match the fantasy in your head.
The first draft of anything is always painful.
Always. But the perfectionist looks at the friction of that first attempt and their brain panics. They say, this isn't perfect, it feels bad, therefore I am failing. And so they quit. They surrender before they even gain momentum.
Just to avoid the feeling of failure.
But here is the trick of the ego. By quitting because it wasn't perfect, the ego gets to preserve the fantasy that they could have been a genius if only the circumstances were right. They protect their potential by never testing it against reality.
That is devastating. We prefer the safety of our imaginary potential over the humiliation of actual clumsy progress.
Precisely. And the source material uses one of the most stunning cinematic illustrations from Islamic history to put the absolute arrogance of our perfectionism into perspective. It references the story of Dhul Qarnayn and the wall.
Okay, for the listener, let's paint the picture of who Dhul Qarnayn was. In the historical and Quranic context, he is presented as a mighty, just ruler and conqueror who traveled to the ends of the earth. He is given immense power and resources.
A figure of unmatched authority.
Right. And he encounters a vulnerable population being terrorized by a destructive force, Gog and Magog.
And they ask him to build a barrier to protect them. Now, look at the architecture of what he constructs. He doesn't build a mud brick fence. He engineered a masterpiece.
Yeah, the description is intense.
He tells them to bring blocks of iron, stacking them between two mountains, and then he commands them to blow on the fires until the iron is red hot, and he pours molten copper over the iron to seal it.
It is an impenetrable, monolithic structure.
Yeah.
In the context of the physical world, it is the absolute pinnacle of human engineering, security, and achievement. It is as close to a perfect work as a human being could possibly manifest.
Exactly. Now observe the psychology of the builder. Dul Qarnayn steps back. He looks at this flawless, monumental masterpiece that he has just willed into existence. What is his reaction?
Well, a modern, ego-driven leader would stand before that wall, chisel their name into it in huge letters, and declare, "Look upon my mighty works in despair. This will stand for 1,000 years."
They would brand it. They would build an entire personal legacy around it.
But Dul Qarnayn looks at the greatest physical achievement in history and says, "This is a mercy from my Lord, but when the promise of my Lord comes, he will level it to dust."
That gives me chills. He immediately, in the very moment of his greatest triumph, acknowledges its temporary nature. He anticipates its destruction.
It's so humbling.
He recognizes the fundamental law of the worldly reality. Everything physical, everything human-made is temporal. It will degrade. It will turn to dust. So the psychological question for us is this.
Yeah.
If the greatest, most powerful leader in history can look at an impenetrable wall of iron and copper and accept that it is imperfect and temporary, why on earth do you demand eternal permanence and absolute perfection from your daily mundane efforts?
Wow.
Why do you demand perfection from your Tuesday morning workout or your first attempt at a business plan?
It is profound arrogance. We disguise our perfectionism as having high standards, but it is really just an arrogant refusal to accept our human limitations. We think we're above making a mess.
We think we're exempt from entropy.
And what accelerates this toxicity today, what makes it so much worse than it was 20 years ago, is that we do not experience this perfectionism in a vacuum. We experience it in a digital ecosystem built entirely on social comparison.
The poison of comparison. It is the great paralyzer of the modern mind.
The research addresses this head-on, and it is so relatable it physically hurts. You are sitting at your desk, finally trying to do the work. You open a book to study Arabic, or you try to memorize a verse of the Quran, or you start drafting a business proposal.
You're making the effort.
Right. And your mind immediately starts scrolling through the mental Rolodex of everyone you follow online. The whisper starts, "Look at him. He is 5 years younger than me, and he already memorized the entire Quran, and I am still stuttering through the alphabet.
The comparison trap.
Look at her. She launched a massive company in 6 months, and I've been trying to figure out my LLC paperwork for 2 years.
The crushing anxiety of feeling permanently behind schedule.
Yes, I am failing because I am not moving at their speed. We take someone else's carefully curated, heavily edited highlight reel, and we wield it like a weapon to beat our own clumsy progress into submission. We feel so much shame at our slow pace that we just close the book and go back to sleep.
To dismantle this, we need to apply expert spiritual analysis. Let's look back at the 3 groups in Medina that we discussed earlier.
Okay, the elites, the hypocrites, and the messy middle.
Right. You had the elite muhajirun who sacrificed everything, and you had the ordinary, flawed people in group 3 who mixed good and bad deeds. Do you think the ordinary people were sitting in their homes, paralyzed by depression, refusing to pray or work because they weren't at the spiritual level of the muhajirun?
If they were operating under our modern psychology, they absolutely would have. They would have said, well, I wasn't in the cave of Hira with the prophet. I didn't suffer the boycott in Mecca. My spiritual resume is weak, so I might as well just give up. I'll never be an elite.
But they didn't. They did their specific work. The source material responds to our modern anxiety over comparison with a brilliant theological framing.
What's the framing?
When you look at someone else and despair over your own progress, you are committing a subtle psychological rebellion against divine reality. You are rejecting the specific parameters of your own existence.
I need you to break that down.
Yeah.
What does that mean, to reject the parameters of your existence?
When you look at a peer who learned a complex language in 2 months or built a thriving company in a year, you are only looking at the surface level output. You are entirely ignoring the unseen architecture of their life.
You only see the trophy, not the training.
Worse than that, you are ignoring the fact that Allah did not give you their starting line. He did not give you their specific genetic intellectual capacity, their neurochemistry, their financial safety net, their free time, or their specific life circumstances.
That's a huge blind spot.
And equally, you do not see their hidden burdens, their private tragedies, or the unique trials they are facing behind closed doors.
You are comparing your messy, unedited Chapter 1 to their polished, heavily marketed Chapter 20.
Exactly. And beyond the social media illusion, you are assuming that your curriculum is the same as theirs. It is not. In the spiritual framework, every human being is handed a unique divine syllabus.
A divine syllabus. I love that term.
Your syllabus includes specific limitations, specific traumas you have to heal from, specific financial hurdles, and specific physical capacities. Their syllabus is entirely different. Comparing your grades on your syllabus to their grades on a completely different exam is not just illogical. It is a self-inflicted psychological torture.
It really is.
You must give yourself the grace and the permission to work within the exact, messy, limited parameters that Allah gave you.
That framing, it completely changes the physical sensation in the body. It takes the tightness out of the chest. It shifts the entire focus from a frantic, competitive, how do I beat them, to a grounded, realistic, how do I do the best with the specific tools and the specific wreckage I have right in front of me today.
It replaces anxiety with agency. And this profound acceptance of our limitations leads us directly into the final and perhaps most liberating concept in our deep dive, the concept of practical idealism.
This is where I feel the theological structure of Islam offers the ultimate antidote to the psychological traps we spent the last hour unpacking. The research explicitly states that Islam is not a philosophy of theoretical, unattainable idealism.
No, not at all.
It is not a Greek philosophy demanding you reach the realm of the perfect forms. It is a religion of practical idealism.
It is a system engineered by the creator of human beings, fully acknowledging the frailty of the human machine. It does not demand that you operate like a flawless, tireless angel.
Because we are angels.
Right. It is a system designed for creatures of flesh and blood, creatures whose backs stick, whose minds wander, whose hearts get broken, and whose energy depletes.
When you look at the actual jurisprudential rules of the faith, the everyday mechanics of how a Muslim is supposed to practice through the lens of this practical idealism, it is actually staggering. Let's run through the examples provided in the source material, and let's ground them in the reality of a modern, exhausted person.
Let's do it.
In the ideal scenario, you are commanded to stand up straight when you perform your daily prayers. Standing is a fundamental pillar of the ritual. But what if your reality is that you just worked a 12-hour shift on a concrete floor, your knees are shot, or you are battling an autoimmune flare-up and standing is excruciating?
The divine system immediately fluidly accommodates reality. The absolute command softens. The law says, if you cannot stand, sit down and pray.
And if the illness is so severe that even sitting up causes agony,
lie down on your side. Pray with the subtle motions of your eyes if you must. The rigid physical perfection of the posture is instantly subordinated to the reality of your pain. The divine does not want to break you. It wants to connect with you.
that is beautiful. What about the ritual of purification? The ideal command is clear. You must make wudu, ablution, with pure, clean water before you stand for prayer. But what if your reality is that you are stranded in a desert without access to a well? Or what if you're in freezing conditions where washing with cold water could literally induce hypothermia?
The system does not demand that you risk your life for the ideal ritual. It introduces tayammum.
Which is?
You strike the dry, clean dust of the earth with your hands, wipe your face and arms, and you are considered ritually pure. The ritual adapts to the harshness of the environment.
You are traveling. You are exhausted from navigating airports or driving hundreds of miles. The system says you do not have to pray the full 4 units. Shorten your prayers to 2. Combine them so you can rest.
It actively encourages you to take the concession.
What if it is a month of Ramadan, the holiest month of the year, the pinnacle of communal fasting, but you are struck with a severe flu, or you are pregnant, or you're traveling?
The system actively commands you not to fast. It is considered more beloved to utilize the exemption and preserve your health than to stubbornly harm yourself trying to achieve an ideal. You simply make the days up later when your body is restored.
Even when we look at the optional elite spiritual practices, you read the biographies of spiritual giants who spent the entire night praying tahajjud, standing in the dark, weeping until dawn.
The legends.
And you, listening right now, you want to reach that level. You want that spiritual high. But your reality is that you are a single mother whose toddler wakes up 3 times a night, or you work 2 jobs just to make rent, and if you stay up all night, you will literally collapse the next day.
The system places no such burden on you. The Prophet advised that if you cannot pray half the night, pray a third. If you cannot do that, pray 2 short units before you finally fall into bed exhausted.
Start small.
If you cannot even do that, just maintain your mandatory prayers and go to sleep with the intention that your rest is a preparation for tomorrow's work.
The system itself is structurally inherently designed to absorb human limitation. We often view religion, or any high moral standard, as a rigid, unyielding tightrope. One slip, and you plummet. But looking at these accommodations, it isn't a tightrope at all. It is a massive, sprawling safety net.
That is the core insight that dismantles perfectionism. The divine architecture of the faith has already factored in your frailty. Allah already knows you're going to get tired. He already knows your tension will fracture. He does not expect pristine perfection from you. He expects sincere, resilient, continuous effort.
He expects you to stay in the game.
He expects you to stay on the path, even if you are moving at a crawl, even if you are limping.
He expects the work.
He expects the relentless, unglamorous, realistic work.
Which brings us to the ultimate crescendo of this entire discussion, the high retention shift where all the theory falls away and we are left staring at the bare reality of our choices. The source material strips down all the philosophical defense mechanisms and issues a final call to action.
Whatever it is you are facing right now, whether you are committing to a grueling 30-day program to learn a new language, whether you are trying to build an honest business to pull your family out of debt, whether you are trying to memorize a portion of the Quran, or whether you are doing the terrifying, exhausting, emotional labor of trying to heal a broken marriage, you have to commit to the brutal reality of the process.
You cannot just sit around desiring the aesthetic title of fluent speaker, successful CEO, Hafiz, or peacemaker. You have to actually want the friction of the work. And the source gives us a realistic warning. You will fail.
You will.
You will stumble. You will find yourself right back in that dark, cold forest we talked about earlier, sitting on the damp earth, overwhelmed and crying.
You will make a mess of things. Group 3 in Medina, walking alongside the Prophet, made mistakes. It is an inescapable part of the human curriculum. Your tears are valid. Your exhaustion is real.
But the absolute, undeniable, crucial difference between a life of paralysis and a life of profound purpose is what you choose to do the moment after the tears stop falling.
Yeah.
When you are done crying, when the box of tissues is empty, you have to look at the desk. The divine assignment of your life is still sitting there. You have to pick up the pencil, look at the difficult equation, and do the work.
This relentless, realistic, entirely unglamorous work ethic, completely devoid of the ego's pathetic desire for titles and radically stripped of the paralyzing demand for perfection, is the only mechanism that will elevate the individual, and by extension, it is the only mechanism that will ever elevate the broader ummah.
Let's gently pull ourselves up from the depths of this conversation. We have traversed an immense psychological and spiritual landscape today. We started by dismantling the crippling mirage of the Golden Age, realizing that even the most perfect society in history was forced to navigate the friction of hidden hypocrites and deeply flawed humans.
We waded into the psychological trap of crying in the woods, dissecting how our modern attention economy rewards the broadcasting of our trauma and reminding ourselves that human emotion, while entirely valid, does not alter physical responsibility. The forest remains until we walk out of it.
We took a hard, uncomfortable look at the modern ego's obsession with leadership titles, discovering that in the divine framework, true leadership is directional, not positional. It is merely a byproduct of undeniably valuable work.
We analyze the toxic, paralyzing mechanics of perfectionism and the poison of social comparison, establishing that you cannot judge your unique, messy reality against the highlight reel of someone operating on an entirely different divine syllabus.
And finally, we found refuge in the beautiful, merciful reality of practical idealism, a divine system that doesn't demand you to be a flawless angel, but simply accommodates your humanity and asks you to keep trying.
I believe the most profound and comforting takeaway from all of this is a sense of deep emotional clarity. Your mistakes are not an anomaly that disqualify you from grace. They are expected. Your humanity, your limitations, your chronic fatigue, your moments of doubt, they were all factored into the divine plan long before you were born. The merciful accommodations of the religion prove that. So stop punishing yourself for not being a creature of light. Stop putting your life on hold, waiting for perfect circumstances that will literally never arrive.
Just do the work. The reality is undeniable. If the grandest walls in human history, built of solid iron and molten copper by the greatest leaders, will eventually degrade and turn to dust. Wait, no. If they will eventually degrade and turn to dust, and if the loudest titles, the most viral social media posts, and the shiniest certificates will inevitably fade into forgotten history, then strip it all away.
Strip it away.
Strip away the audience,
Yeah.
strip away the algorithm,
Yeah.
strip away the title. What is the actual, tangible work your hands are doing right now, alone in the dark?